Hello, I'm John Thorne from Thorney Motorsport, and this is quite a long video, hence I'm sitting down, where we are updating some of our other videos that we have done, but specifically probably our most popular video, which was our 4 years of owning a Mclaren, which we shot about 18 months or so ago. Now, the reason for the update is that obviously time has passed on since then, and also our experience in the cars has grown over the last 5 years. So we are now really much encompassing a lot more data, a lot more knowledge about the cars that we want to share, specifically in terms of a long-term ownership for the cars themselves. So what we've done over lockdown with the coronavirus is that we've gone through our database and we have literally looked at every single car that we have worked on. Now this is cars we have actually physically worked on or inspected, not simply seen or come through the workshop for a quick check over, probably worked on. And it numbers just over 220 now. What we did was took a database and then we went through the mileage of those cars and also the work that needed to be done. And then we worked out the percentage of what needs done on each car and the instances and the mileages those problems tended to come up. In total, we have worked on cars, Mclarens, which have covered just over 5 million miles in total. The actual number is 5,243,306. However, that number will change. I've got 5 cars in this week. The majority of them are 12C and 650 because they're the older cars. And as a Mclaren independent, rather than being a dealership, we tend to see the older cars, not the brand new cars. We can still service brand new cars, and we do look after several 720s now for customers, but they tend to stay in the dealer network until they've got a warranty, and then they come to people like us. I would not say we don't see new cars ourselves. We own 3 cars now. We started off by buying a Mclaren MP412C Spider, as it was then called. We then bought a 570, which we converted to our GT4 car, and then we now have our 720 Spider, which we're working on. So we've used these cars as development, research for our own purposes, but also to learn the cars and also to find out what problems exist. Now, before I go any further, this video by definition is talking about problems the cars have. It is not a video talking about problematic Mclarens, okay? Hopefully by the end of this video, if you bother to watch it, you'll realize that this is not a video about how bad they are, but actual fact how good they are. And in terms of things that do go wrong, the incidence of them and the cost of fixing them is actually very low. The second thing I'm going to mention is that we are starting to see owners who are coming into the market with relatively low cost 12C examples, and they're paying 60, 50, 70,000 pounds, which is a significant sum of money. But the problem is they're coming in and buying cars that are similar sort of prices, say as a BMW M4 or Audi RS4, this kind of stuff, sometimes cheaper than those ones. And they're expecting parts prices to be very similar to a BMW or to an Audi or even a Ford Focus. The fact is that when these cars first came out, they were all over £200,000. So taking into account parts prices are still going to be for a car that cost over £200,000 to buy when new. The fact that you bought it for £60,000 doesn't suddenly make all the parts come down to the same price. And the reason why I mention that is because parts prices are by far the largest cost proportion of long-term ownership. Bear that in mind. We as an independent are looking for alternatives. We have found several now and brought some prices right down. But the fact life remains that parts come from Mclaren and they control the pricing thereof. So if you're buying a £50,000 car, you're not. You're buying a £200,000 car, which has come down in price of £50,000, thereby enabling you to buy it, but don't expect to service at the same price as a Ford Fiesta once a year. That being said, the issues that we see on these cars over a long period of time are relatively minimal. Okay, so I've got here a piece of paper because I keep forgetting little small things, so I'm doing it in a bit of paper. But there are several issues on the cars which are not related to mileage. I'm going to start with the 12C and 650 and cover the 570 and the 720 towards the end of this video, which I do apologise may be a bit long. So first of all, 5 million miles of cars, that's quite a lot. So are there any problems on these cars which are unrelated to mileage? And there's really 3. 2 big ones and a not so big one. The ones that we all know about, and I'm not going to go over old ground of videos we've done before, is gearboxes and engines. Now, the gearbox is replaced where they leak through the telltale hole because the input shaft wears out, are now becoming rarer and rarer. We haven't done one for a few months. We normally do 2 or 3 a year. Most ones we do now are overseas, where we get the gearbox here, rebuild it and send it back out. Haven't done a UK car now for probably 4 months, which makes me think that whilst the problem is still there, it is primarily for cars that are just not used, and therefore they come back out of hibernation and then cause a problem. It is a £10,000 repair. A dealer, it's about £25,000 replacement, but we obviously rebuild the gearboxes, strengthen them, and off they go again. But it's not that many happening. One of the reasons we recommend an inspection for people buying these cars is to make sure the gearbox is not going to be an issue. Second large one is engines. Now, again, we haven't done any for a while. Every single engine we have had to repair, it is always a top end and is always down to low oil usage. Low oil level, and then a car being driven hard. Check the oil level regularly, and you won't have that problem at all. We've never seen a problem without that being a contributory cause. And it's worthwhile noting at this point in time is that dealers, and we had a conversation with a 720 owner only last week, he was told by the dealer when he bought the car that the engines are sealed. I'm not sure what it means, but you don't need to check the oil. And if there's a problem with the oil, just bring it to a dealership and the car will tell you. Okay, that's categorically not true, all right? All engines need their oil checking regularly. The Mclaren series arguably more so. It's a dry sump system. It is somewhat of a pain in the neck to check the oil, but you should do it every couple of weeks. It really should. So those two problems are both not really repeatable, but also a very infrequent instance now. And they're well known in the marketplace, but make sure in terms of inspection, you should know. And these videos are really designed for two things. First of all, for people who own a car, what to look for and what to expect. And also people looking to buy a car, what should they look for as a process going further forward, and also what to be aware of. So certainly those two big elephants in the room out of the way, engine and gearboxes, they are not common anymore, and they are relatively cost effective to fix. You're talking about a £200,000 car if you keep outside the dealer network replacement. The oil usage and level, there's other videos we've done before and I'll put links into them. Check your oil, please. It's very important. It's not hard. If you can afford the money for £200,000 car, you can afford 2 minutes, it can be a couple of weeks, check the oil, please. Now, the other problem, which is not mileage related, but also relates to all the models, is batteries. Okay, by far and away, the biggest cause of electrical issues on every model is allowing your car to go flat repeatedly. Now, this is a pain in the neck, and I do understand that. The batteries are hideously expensive. £1,800 for a Generation 2 battery. The 12C came up with Generation 1, and it's now been superseded with a new battery and a new harness and a new fitting kit, which means the whole cost is about £2,500. Keep it topped up, or keep the car driven ideally. Drive it every couple of weeks you can, even in salt. I'd rather a car covered in salt and driven regularly than parked up over winter, I really would. And you will never have a problem in terms of batteries. If you allow it to go flat repeatedly, or if you don't plug a trickle charger into it, which cars do come with, or some do, you will have those problems. Now, our 12C is now 5.5 years old, okay? We've allowed it to go flat probably 3 times, never an electrical problem, ever. It's always plugged in a trickle charger or driven all year round, salt, rain, snow, don't mind. We'd rather the car was driven, left parked up. Leave the batteries topped up and not going flat, you won't have a problem with electrical systems. Now, that saying, there are various sensors that go wrong and fall over. There's no real mileage related issue behind it. It's more a question of simple luck of the draw. Now, carrying on with the same theme of not mileage related, there are a couple of problems which do manifest themselves very regularly on all the earlier cars and the later cars now. A couple of these are based on things like clips, water clips, where the clips, the hoses, they're still dreadful. Okay, there's less of them that are dreadful on the 570 and the 720, but they're still pretty crap clips. They do need replacing if they fail. We still recommend you replace the whole lot as a kit, but that's us. They're less common in terms of proportion of poor quality clips on the later models, but they are still there and they do still fail. And there's nothing more frustrating than beaching your £250,000 car because a simple clip has failed and now got a hose to come off and your coolant to pour on the floor. Bear that in mind. Clips are worthwhile changing if you can as regular servicing, and it's not mileage related. Second things are really down to engines, etc. So there are 2 main seals in the engine. There's the front main seal and the rear. The front main seal is a casing and it's a rubber and metal seal. And if a car is parked up, it can weep. Now we see that quite regularly. A weep is not necessarily a bad thing, but it will eventually turn into a leak. So that's something to consider and one of the things we inspect in our buyer's guide. And again, this isn't designed to repeat the buyer's guide. Once I watch those, I'll put some links somewhere for it. It's all about the long-term ownership of a car. Rear main is also when it connects to the gearbox. That's also a prone leaking point, and again, it's just a seal. The downside is it's quite a lot of labour to fix it. And again, I'll put links in the bottom of all here in terms of costs, both in the video and indicated costs, what they cost to fix, rather than talking about it. Otherwise, on the engine, you have things like water pumps, which are again very common, again not mileage related, and we have some specific weird things like power steering pumps that have failed. And this is primarily due to corrosion being caused by the water washer jet pipe coming off and pouring a washer fluid down behind the casing of the power steering pump, causing it to corrode. Again, we've done another video about that, I won't go over it again. So non-mileage related issues, there are a few things out there, but nothing really dramatic. Now, going on the mileage side of it, we've now looking at our database, we have 11 cars that have now done over 90,000 miles on our books. We have 17 cars that have done over 60,000 miles, and around about 25 cars that have done anywhere between 30, 40 and 50,000 miles. So the data we're using on this is based on actual vehicles used by owners. The average mileage for a McLaren in the UK is about 27,000 miles total. So it works out between 4,000 and 6,000 miles a year as an average. Obviously, we've got some mega milers in there. We've got one guy coming in a few weeks' time with 100,000 miles on the clock. He's getting a free service, just sheer belligerence of driving his car that much. But really, it's a mileage type thing. We're looking at some of these things now. Now, on a mileage side, at the 10 and 20,000 mile mark, you've got various oil changes that need to be done at 20,000 miles, but nothing really crops up as a wear and tear item. Obviously, things like brake pads and discs tend to wear out over usage. But in terms of mileage related, not much else is there. Once we start to get to 30 and 40,000 miles, we're starting to see some wear and tear items come into play. Specifically Z-bar links on the back as part of the roll bar system. It's simply a metal and plastic bush. It'll wear out. Not expensive to replace, but we're starting to see those wear out now. Horizontal engine mounts. Again, at around about the 40,000 mile mark, we're starting to see some of those start to wear. Now, it can wear out earlier or later, it all depends on usage. And it's not, again, not a hugely expensive part, and it's a bush, it will wear out. Just how life goes with some of these things. One thing we've seen also, which is something to consider, is that McLaren state that spark plugs don't need to be changed until 70,000 miles. But we're starting to see cars now where they have a random misfire, and it's always fixed by changing the plugs. So there is an instance there where we think maybe the plugs wait until 70,000 miles is probably a little bit aggressive, and changing them earlier at say 40 or 50,000 miles would probably be a good preventative measure to take. That's not to say they need changing. Mine hasn't been changed, and it's 6 years old. But we've had cars here with 35, 40,000 miles with a random misfire, and what we have taken the plugs out, and the plugs are just cooked, over a period of time. You can see a plug does wear out like anything else. It may be an electrical item, but it does have a contact which does wear out. So that's something to consider in terms of servicing. Technically, it's 70,000 miles, but we think waiting till then may not be a great thing to do. Other little things, like even my aid memoir, I'm afraid I can't remember these things. TPSM sensors. Now, this is actually a bit of a bitch, really, because obviously each tyre has a sensor and then two receiver boxes, front and rear. The sensors have an internal battery, which really only lasts 5 years. Okay, so the problem that you have is that each of those sensors is about £100 each. Now, we've tried aftermarket sensors on the 650 and the 12C, and we haven't found one that works consistently. They work for a few months or a few days and they drop out. The later models, for the 570 and the 720, we can use Porsche TPSM sensors. They're 40 odd pounds each, so there's a big difference in price. But the earlier models, we haven't found one yet. Now, if you've got to replace all four, there's 400 quid plus VAT, plus tyres and the fitting, etc. It's a 500, 600 pound job to change your TPSM sensors. Come to 5 years, I guarantee they'll all need changing. It's a battery in the day, it can't last forever. There's something to bear in mind with long-term ownership. It's not mileage related, it's definitely down to how many years. The thing about TPSM sensors as well is that literally they can flash off and cause all kinds of problems. 9 times out of 10 you can ignore it. They really are just sensors just sort of frig off and then disappear again. But it's certainly worthwhile mentioning about 5 years. They will need replacing. Bear that in mind in terms of costings. Drive shaft boots. We've seen a lot now at the 30,000 mile, 40,000 mile mark now where the drive shaft boots are starting to fail. Now, this is a boot, it's going to fail. The downside is Mclaren don't release the drive shaft boot on its own. It comes as part of the drive shaft. That's obviously expensive to replace. We have tried universal drive shaft boots, haven't yet found one yet that works consistently. So it means an expensive thing. It's not a common item, but it's certainly in terms of mileage related, as we start to get to sort of 40, 50,000 miles in this car, we're pretty sure they're all going to need replacing. Same applies to all rubber boots. There are rubber boots on upper and lower ball joints on the front and the rear. It used to be that only the arm would be replaced, now we can replace the boot. So it's not dramatically expensive, but some of the rear joints and raw ball joints are starting to wear out. We can replace them with different rose joints now, slightly different, but it is again a wear and tear item. They're going to wear out, and again, this is at the sort of 40,000 mile mark. We've seen some broken springs on all the models, frankly, including a 720. Doesn't seem mileage related, sheer luck of the draw. We've seen some oil pumps. This is where it gets interesting. Never seen an oil pump, take about one oil pump fail on a 650, but we've seen multiple oil pump failures on 570s and 720s. Don't ask me why, we own two of them, both of them have a failed oil pump. The last thing also in terms of is spring is suspension and accumulators. Now here we have a slightly different opinion compared to dealerships. We rarely replace an accumulator. From our experience, it doesn't actually fix a lot of the problems that the car potentially manifests. We've seen more leaking shocks, normally in the UK with roundabouts, the front left-hand shock is the biggest one that fails most. But changing accumulators all round doesn't fix problems, it masks them. When 9 times out of 10, the actual problem is a failed shock unit. The downside is the shock is more expensive, but from a perspective of fixing the problem, changing the shock fixes it. Accumulators tends not to. There's something to bear in mind. Accumulators are about £200 each. Changing all 4 and the labour to do so is not that dissimilar from changing a shock. But if you have an identified shock problem, then it might be something to look at. Speaking of which, one of the things we do on the shock is we literally park the car and then we'll change the ride mode between comfort and sport and race. The car, this is talking about 12C and 650s, the car will settle and change height. If you have the car bounce, where literally it's up and down one corner, that indicates a shock problem. Doesn't say it is a shock problem, but it indicates that's what you should look for. So something to bear in mind when looking at a car, actually changing the sensors and that. It's very hard, need 2 people, one person inside changing the sensors, changing the settings, other person looking at the car. Pretty much that's it now. We're starting to see some more wear and tear issues on some of the fixings. Certainly on a build quality basis, the 12C and 650 fixings are higher quality than the 570 in terms of quality of them. One of the biggest problems we find with the 570s that we work on is that the under trays are all just welded together because the metal bolts they use are just rusting. And also not helped by some dealers gunning them on with a wheel gun, which makes life complicated. So sometimes we actually had an hour of labour per 570 coming in just to get the under trays off. Simply because it's been gunned on. We replaced the bolts with decent quality stainless steel ones. The 650 and 12C had the same problem but not as bad. And the 720, again, a bit better in terms of process. So overall, in terms of looking at this, these are not nightmare cars to own. If you add all the numbers together and you take it out of an average of 5 years ownership, we're pretty much spot on with our estimate of £1,500 a year is your annual service cost for a Mclaren model. I'm sort of excluding the 720 at the moment, this one, because they're still relatively new. We've had ours for, I don't know, 6 months, 8 months or so. But obviously they're starting to get 3 years old now, so we're starting to see more data from it. Speaking of which, I did another video on the 720. There was an inlet pipe where one of the baffles is coming loose. Now I put a video out saying that we just don't see it. Following some comments from my American colleagues, it seems to be more of a prevalent problem over there. And so we'll keep an eye on it. But certainly from a UK perspective, and the cars we see here, we've never seen the problem, ever. And that's dozens of cars, including our own, on track and on road, never seen the problem. And we speak to dealer contacts we have and the contacts at Woking, they don't recognise the problem either. However, I'm not going to be so arrogant to assume it's not the case. If the guys in America say it's more prevalent, we will keep an eye on the process. But as far as we're concerned, it is not something we consider as an issue. And also removing them, the car does make a dreadful noise. It really does. But overall in the 720 so far, we have not encountered too many problems. Now, that's not to say you have the panel gap issues and corrosion issues, which again, we've covered in other videos, so I won't cover it again. So there are the ongoing process with these cars. But from a purpose of mileage and using the car, we have not found any particular point in time where you're going to look at a massive bill. Now, if you add it all together, it's all expensive to do. But in terms of, so hence when buying a new car, we recommend an inspection, because we'll be able to tell you how long you've got for things before they start needing replacing. And also comes down to the second part of inspections, is that because the cars have come down in price so much, they are falling into the hands of people who are, let's say, not really spending money on them. Okay, some very poor servicing regimes are going through. We've seen some cross-threaded sump bolts that have wrecked entire oil tanks. And numerous little issues that a minor doing something wrong can cause a major problem in terms of cost of parts especially. Now, speaking of cost of parts, we're now, as far as we're aware, the largest Mclaren independent in Europe, potentially the world in terms of numbers of cars we do. And like I said, 5 million odd miles cars uncovered right here. That makes us pretty big. Also, we buy anywhere between 200 and 300,000 pounds a year in Mclaren parts. Okay, by far our biggest bugbear is the fact not only do we make a profit on parts, but they are expensive. Okay, but take that account at the beginning of the program, of the video. These are not £60,000 cars. They are £200,000 cars that you can now buy for £60,000. So take that into account on parts prices. So if a lower arm costs £700 and you say, blimey, my BMW M3 is only 150, you know what? That's why. There's a difference in price you have to deal with. Hopefully over time more aftermarket stuff be available. It's a very small market, which makes it tough to develop these things for them, but we are doing little bits here and there. And it also goes into warranties and stuff. This is still, we have our own warranty. We now run about 60 odd cars under our warranty now. It is something that was very successful for us, but also for our owners. But again, this is a little video that says, do you need one? You know, I'd rather do myself out of a sale than say spending thousands of pounds on warranties may not be what you need to do. They are not expensive cars to run in that regard. But I do appreciate that some people want to drive a car and they think, oh, I've got a £10,000 bill for a gearbox. That's not something I want to think about. Anyway, so that's up in terms of video. There's a few more bits to come through in this one process. We wanted to update that one. And then we thought suddenly hitting a 5 million miles on cars was a useful a milestone to celebrate almost. You know, these are fantastic cars. They are not huge money pits to operate. And over time with mileages, it is not something you're going to get a big bill. I'll end on one thing though, and I've mentioned it before. According to the McLaren's own manual, the airbags at 15 years old, albeit 6-7 years away, all need to be replaced. Not inspected, replaced. That's about £20,000. Okay. Now, I fully expect McLaren will come back and say, you know what, we just get inspect them, don't need all replacing. But as it stands right now, if you don't change your airbags at 15 years, you will run into insurance issues in the event of an accident of some kind and then not going off. So it's something to consider. Now, I fully believe McLaren will come through and say, look, you know what, they're fine. But as it stands right now, I will not be doing our customers a service if I didn't mention this to people at the process. Am I worried about it? Not in the slightest, but it's something I need to mention to make sure you're aware. Hopefully that's useful. A little bit of a dragging on video. We are going to do more update stuff on the 570 and 720, but the fact of life remains at the moment, they aren't generating any additional problems as what we've seen before. They really are very, very good. So hope it's useful. Please do leave the comments, let us know. And then there should be links to various bits about costs and how these things are due. Also used for the UK market, but might be indicative for our worldwide viewers as well. All right. Thanks for watching. Talk to you again soon. Cheers.